Hey everybody, ronarray here, and new Path of Exile 1 leak 3.26 looks absolutely massive. There are a lot of skills and ascendancies changes, but in this video I want to cover the biggest buffs that skills received. There have been a pretty decent amount of nerfs and you probably already seen some of them. Here I'm going to mostly focus on the buffed skill that could be played right now and definitely should feel better too. I'm also going to share my opinion on what kind of ascendancies or skills could be played with. I'm going to cover the skills that also been nerfed, but in my opinion still playable. Let's go. So during that list, I'm also going to focus on the skill that in my opinion going to be played more often first, because they're going to be stronger or will be just like more promising in general, and the skill that in my opinion will be played less going to be at the end of the list. You can also check the dedicated timestamps for any particular skills. And right now, let's talk about skills in particular. First one is going to be Cyclone. Cyclone received a pretty nice damage effectiveness bonus, which is approximately, will add like 14% of damage effectiveness. It's also going to receive like similar movement speed, because movement speed be moved from quality to just a basic gem levels. However, they added like additional area of effect to quality, and they also buffed like area of effect in general. It's 15% instead of 10% right now. So I really feel like Cyclone will be much more comfortable to play after all those changes. AoE is going to be significantly bigger. Movement speed is going to stay the same, and if you play just like a basic version of Cyclone, you can get a little more damage effectiveness. I think it's still going to be a very popular skill, especially since GG showcased a few new uniques which should stack pretty nice with Cyclone. And for custom critical, it's going to be one of the best options right now, especially with bigger AoE. I think Cyclone will be mostly played with Slayer, Berserker, and probably the champion right now, because that's the melee skill. As custom critical skill, it would be played with almost any other ascendancy, but mostly just like melee ascendancies are going to benefit from the buffs. And the next skill that I want to mention is Crash of Cadence. Crash of Cadence always been like a very cool options for league start, because it can freeze all the enemies on the screen, and right now it's receiving a pretty nice buff. So first off, they're improving the attack speed, like right now it's 100%, it's been 90, which is pretty good. They're also a little improving mana cost, but I don't think it's important. And they're improving like quality. Before it's been providing like 15% of extra cold, and right now it's going to be 20. So right now Ice Crash is going to be one of the very good and underappreciated league starters in my opinion, because more speed together with a little more damage are going to lead to a pretty good results, especially since skill been played before. I think the most popular ascendancy here is going to be Slayer again, but running something like Berserker or even Inquisitor is going to be a pretty nice idea, because Crash of Cadence is mostly the skill that just stacks with like elemental damage. And the next one is Winter Orb. Winter Orb been a very beloved skill at some point of Path of Exile, but after that it got nerfed a few times and unfortunately it fell from grace. Right now GG trying to get it back. So they're raising damage effectiveness for almost like 30% from 60 to 80. They're also improving like base damage, which is pretty nice, adding about 30% of additional base damage at level 20. And they're also changing stages. It will be like 8 stages, and before it's been 10. Together with like higher duration per stage, right now 30 and been 25. I think with those changes, Winter Orb is going to be much more popular, because it will be easier to reach like maximum amount of stages, and damage effectiveness together with like a flat damage is going to make skill pretty decent, because at 30% damage effectiveness and 30% just like base damage. The bigger question, will it be enough to move Winter Orb back to the meta, or it's still going to be a niche skill that played only in some builds? Right now I would say it will get stuck somewhere in between, so some people will take the jump and practically try it out, and some people will just play more like tried and true skills with elements. Ascendancies for Winter Orb most of the time is like Occultist, and I think Elementalist is going to be a pretty decent option right now. For something very unusual, you can also run Winter Orb at Slayer, because you can utilize like very fast movement speeds that you can get from unique body armor, together with bonuses from Slayer to just like endurance charges themselves. And next skills are pretty much Chaos Dot. First off is Essence Drain of Desperation and Essence Drain of Wickedness. Main Essence Drain just received 20% of damage buff both for like hits and damage over time. And since main Essence Drain is pretty much the most playable skill out of them all, I think only that buff matters. On top of it, we also received about 20% of additional bonus damage for Contagion. So both Essence Drain and Contagion received 20% buff. ED plus Contagion been always a pretty decent option for League start, and with 20% buff, I think it will be much easier to level up with it. And I'm definitely looking forward to see more ED plus Contagion builds like in a good old times. Ascendancies here probably would be like Trickster, I think some variations could take Pathfinder as well. And you can practically run it on any other Ascendancy as the base setup as well. Another skill that got significantly buffed is just like Burning Arrow Vigour. GG decided to make it a little faster, so 75% of bake speed compared to 70 that we had before. And right now it's going to have significantly more maximum life damage. So at level 20 of the gem, it's going to be 32% compared to 24 before. That's a huge increase, which is like 35% more damage for Burning Arrow Vigour. A lot of people played the skill before, and I think right now it's probably going to be even more popular. And I think it's mostly going to be combined with like Champion or maybe Dead Ascendancies. Most of the Burning Arrow builds are playing like with Champion. However, I think a pretty unusual option with Elementalist is also could be possible. Moving forward, GG is also buffing like Bane of Condemnation. I don't think Bane of Condemnation is that popular right now, but it's going to receive a little higher cast time, together with a pretty decent damage buff, approximately like 25%. I think it will help Bane of Condemnation to be like a proper build that some people will play more often. And Ascendancies right here is probably going to be mostly Occultists, because additional bonuses to cursors here is pretty good combination for Bane. Next step is just Blade Blast of Unloading. It's going to have like 5% more damage per Blade Vortex blade at all gem levels, and I think it's not going to be enough to make the skill meta, but it's definitely going to be enough so more people would try it out. People played Blade Blast before because it could be a very nice skill to use, especially on a budget. So I think in like league starting conditions, it's going to be a very good option to play it as well. And for Ascendancies for Blade Blast, I think it's going to be mostly like Saboteur and Assassin. Another thing that got buffed being like Blade Trap of Greatswords. Right now it will have much more like a damage effectiveness, about 20% approximately, and it will also have 25% less cooldown. That's a pretty great buff, but I don't think a lot of people will play that. Because Blade Trap of Greatswords wasn't popular before, like almost nobody played that, and I don't think that 20% buff is enough to make it a very good option. Blade Vortex of the Scythe, on the other hand, it received a lot of changes right now. First off, it received a huge damage buff. It's about 50% more damage effectiveness, 300% instead of 200%, which in my opinion is pretty great. It will also have higher base duration, together with much higher physical damage. That's about 50% physical damage increase. Blade Vortex of Scythe never been pretty popular before, but I think right now more people would try to play it because buff to the damage is very big. It's practically 50% more damage. In terms of Ascendancies, I think it could be played like on Trickster, on Occultist for example, but I'm looking forward to unusual options such as Champion, because I think why not? It could stack pretty well. The next skill that got buffed by GG is Blight. It currently just doing 20% of additional damage, and I think people never played Blight like a main damage dealer, and even together with 20% of additional damage, not a lot of people will even try. I think it's mostly will stay like just a debuff skill and people will keep using it together with, for example, ED plus Contagion. And another skill that got buffed significantly is like Crackling Lance of Branching and Crackling Lance of Disintegration. It's practically received about like 27 to 30% of damage effectiveness, which is pretty nice. I don't think they've been too popular, but people played Crackling Lance of Branching at some point. So I think right now probably more people would try. And such ascendancies as Elementalist, which is going to get buffed together with like Inquisitor, for example, Hierophant, or something like that, is going to be a very good option to try out Crackling Lance in general. GG also decided to pick a Cold Snap, the skill that been kinda popular at some point in Path of Exile, and improve it again. It received 20% of damage effectiveness buff, together with 20% of more hit damage and 20% of base like damage over time bonus. Right now it's a pretty solid buff and I think more Cold Snap builds are definitely going to be there. But compared to even options that we already mentioned in that list, such as Winter Orb, I think just Cold Snap builds would feel a little too clunky for a big amount of players to try them out. And right now, in terms of ascendancies, I think like Elementalist or Occultist is probably going to be the best. But maybe something like Trickster could be an unusual option here as well to get better tankiness from it. GG also buffed all Divine Ire's options, so like normal Divine Ire of Disintegration, and Divine Ire of Holy Light. Most of them received a pretty moderate buff, like approximately 20% to the damage. Disintegration got buffed a little harder, I would say like it's about 40% of additional damage, but I don't think they're going to be too popular. The only proper option for Divine Ire is just Divine Ire Totems, which play it with Hierophant. So maybe those totems are going to be a little better, especially at the League Start, but I don't think they're going to be pushed to the endgame, and most of the people who will League Start it probably will repeat later on. Next skill is Firestorm of Meteors, and it got a pretty nice buff, but not too big as well. That's approximately 10% of additional damage on almost all levels and all situations. Even if that had been probably the least popular Firestorm version, right now it still could be played, for example, like with Chieftain or with Inquisitor. However, I don't really think that Firestorm of Meteors will find any proper place in the meta, because right now 10% damage buff looks too low to change practically anything. Another skill that got buffed but only slightly is Reap. So Reap right now will do more like base physical damage itself, which is pretty nice. So it's damage over time bonus, but I don't think it's going to affect it too heavily, because most of the Reap builds are just dealing like a hit damage instead. It could be still nice to clear and probably going to add a little quality of life here, but 20% dot damage is definitely not what I would bank myself on. However, it's pretty cool that Reap is not nerfed, so I'm absolutely sure that more people will try it out. I already worked on one of the Reap builds before, and maybe I will work on another that league. Stay tuned. So the next skill is Soulrend, and Soulrend received a very similar buff that Reap received. It's 20% of damage over time again for Soulrend and Soulrend of the Spiral. I don't think it's going to change a lot, because Soulrend been barely played as damage over time skill. I did a Soulrend build myself a few times, and most of the time I've been just baiting everything on Soulrend of the Spiral and casting many Soulrends to utilize the very high hit damage. Right now, not a lot of things are going to get changed, but probably again a little quality of life here and there would be added. For both Reap and Soulrend, I think good ascendancies would be something from Templar, so for example like Inquisitor, and I think for Soulrend it could be a Deadeye. However, for Reap it could be like Elementalist, or even a Juggernaut, because it was like a Lightning Reap version. Going forward, GG also decided to buff Vortex at least a little, together with Vortex of Projection. I don't think Vortex been a popular skill for a very long time, but it's always been a very decent league starter. So right now, it's going to be significantly more damage for itself, so like damage effectiveness is higher, about 20% approximately. Also base core damage is higher as well. I think with such setup, Vortex is going to be a pretty good option to league start with, especially if you want to play like around cold damage, or maybe you can combine it with Winter Orb, making a pretty decent cold build overall. So for Vortex, I think like Occultist again, Elementalist, and maybe Inquisitor is probably going to be the best options. And the skill that got nerfed, but in my opinion still very playable, is Molten Strike of Zenith. Molten Strike of Zenith been one of the strongest skills in Path of Exile in the previous league in Settlers. And GG decided to nerf it, which is kinda obvious. However, I really feel like nerf to Molten Strike of Zenith is not really going to ruin it completely. Approximately, Zenith lost about 30% of DPS. It's kinda going to feel it, but considering the DPS been absolutely crazy before, I'm sure that Zenith is going to stay pretty good and we will see a lot of builds with it. Ascendancies that usually people play Zenith is just like Chieftain, is Juggernaut, or even Slayer or Trickster in some situations. I think there are going to be a lot of versions because skill is definitely not nerfed into the ground and will be playable in many occasions. So that's been the whole list of the skills that got buffed. Some of them are looking definitely better than others. Personally, I'm pretty much interested in the Ice Crash of Cadence because it's looking good, in the Winter Orb because the skill itself is kinda nice, and I think buff to Essence Drain and Contagion is looking very promising as well. I will see what kind of skills I will work on because any of them could be a pretty nice league starters. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for my league starter build videos that are going to be up pretty soon. ronarray out.